Oh, yes.
Welcome back once again. Today I have a review for War for Cybertron Siege Deluxe Class Prowl. He's number 23 in the series. Prowl is an all-new mold, and he is meant to evoke the classic Generation 1 design while mixing up some elements with Cybertronian design cues. So if you're familiar with my reviews, you know how this works. We're going to take a look at the box, the instructions, then we'll look at Prowl himself in both of his modes, his transformation, and I'll do some comparisons with some other figures before giving my final thoughts. Alright, let's begin. Prowl's box is your standard Siege Deluxe class box. It's got all your brandings, Prowl's name right here with his serial code, number 23. Got his city symbol in the background. And then over here we have some nice box art for Prowl. Has him looking very serious, like he means business, but also kind of like he's creeping around somewhere. You got some robots in the background that I can't really make out. They might just be generics. Still a cool little touch there. I like the glowing effect coming from his eyes. That's cool. If you view this artwork with a black light, you'll be able to see a hidden message on here. And for Prowl, it's Praxus, Praxus, which describes a city on Cybertron. If you go to the Transformers website and enter that code, you unlock some special content about Prowl. So, back of the box shows you Prowl's two modes, robot and vehicle. Shows that he requires 14 steps for transformation. And then we have his interactivity with Battle Masters on display. And then over here, standard Siege artwork. Now Prowl's instructions are pretty standard fare. Got a big close-up of him on the front here. Shows his transformation from robot to vehicle mode. Interactivity with the Battle Masters and Micromasters here. And then goes into detail on his weapons. Now this is a little odd because he really only has one weapon, which is called the W45. And it's called the Acid Pellet Strike Blaster. And the only difference here is whether or not you have his light bar attached to the top of the weapon. If you have it attached, it's called Axe Mode. You can see it kind of looks like an axe, right? Or if you don't have it, then it's just called Blaster Mode. And then if you look over here, it shows you combining the two. W45 Acid Pellet Strike Blaster, Axe Mode. Problem is, he can't wield it like an axe. So it's very confusing. I can see how it looks like an axe, but he's still holding it like a gun, and this barrel doesn't fit in his hand, so he can't use it as an axe. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. Alright, Prowl's vehicle mode is a Cybertronian police car that vaguely resembles his original Earth mode police car. And it's very smooth, very sleek. It's got all this clear plastic. You can see the details underneath here. It has this gun mounted on top, which can be removed. And it has this light bar, which is actually its own separate piece. It's got his Autobot symbol here. And compared to other Siege toys, he's very simple in design. You know, there's no crazy greeble or anything. It's mostly smooth surfaces. It's got his ancient Autobot written on here. And yeah, I mean, not very exciting compared to the other toys. It does have these cool transparent wheels that I like. Really neat, really different. And oddly enough, he doesn't really have any 5mm ports except for this one right here on the top of his light bar. Technically he has some underneath, but that wouldn't work very well because then he couldn't drive. So he's kind of odd in that regard. His vehicle mode really lacks any sort of way to arm itself. Alright, the transformation to robot mode is very simple. Remove any accessories if you haven't already. Set them off to the side. Alright, go ahead and pull these doors open. Like that. I'm going to swing these arms down. So, and out. that. Yeah. Bend this part up a little bit. Swing that kind of out and away. I'm gonna unfold his legs like so. Separate the legs. Pull his heel struts out like that. Stand him up. Do a 180 at the waist. Now you can see I have his head backwards because it prevents you from seeing his face on the underside of his car mode. The instructions don't actually tell you to rotate his head backwards, but you're perfectly able to do so without any sort of clearance issues. So it's up to you if you want to do that. It's optional. Right, so anyway, we're going to take this piece here, flip it all the way out, push this piece inward a little bit, and this requires a little bit of finesse. So this hood bit has to slide inside this cavity here. Then you want to bring his chest down over his head. Try not to scrape it against the head so you don't remove any of the red paint. And this bit is going to tab down in here. Flip his head around if you need to. Bend his shoulders. And you're going to bring his arms down, and this piece will actually rotate. And for accuracy's sake, you want to keep it just pointing up. Alright, so there is the robot mode. Pretty simple, right? Pretty obviously Prowl. And then his weapons, you can have him just wield the regular blaster if you'd like to. It's up to you. Though then there aren't really any places to put the light bar that, you know, don't look silly. You don't want him holding it. Might work if you put it on his arm. That'll look kind of cool, I guess. Could just leave it on the top there, where I guess it's not too in the way. It's up to you. Or you can just go ahead and stick the light bar on top of the blaster. Makes it look a little more fleshed out, and you know, doesn't really make a huge difference either way. Yeah, this is the robot mode. Has a really good amount of articulation. Head is on a ball joint. Got the hinge and swivel combo for the shoulders. Shoulders themselves actually rotate. Does have a full 360-degree turning waist. Regular elbows. Wrist swivel, which is good. His legs are also a hinge and swivel combo. Has some limited thigh swivel. Clearance prevents it from turning all the way around, but it's there. Single hinge knee. Has ankle rock and tilt, which is cool. So yeah, he meets all the standards of a Siege Deluxe. Now the rotating shoulders, they can be very handy if you're attaching weaponizers. Normally the 5mm ports are on the side of the shoulders. For him, by default, they're on the top, but if you need to, you can always just bring them down like that. So, don't know if that's intentional or not, but it works out pretty well. The robot mode is very accurate to his classic form. The only thing I really feel is missing is a secondary hinge here at the doors to allow them to point upward a little bit, just to give him extra little bit of accuracy. But not a huge loss, not terribly distracting. And here's a comparison to the last Prowl toy that's been released in the main line. This is Combiner Wars Prowl. And you can see there's a very significant difference between their overall body shapes, and we owe that to the fact that this Prowl is a remold of Combiner Wars Dead End. So they did go through the efforts of trying to make it look like Prowl, you know. It's got the right head sculpt and everything. Painted his chest up to look kind of like the car hood over here. And it's got this blue paint on his shins, which are supposed to evoke the windshields here. They're pretty close in height overall. The Combiner Wars one is still taller, but not by much. Maybe half a head or so. So I imagine get the size about the same. And for probably the best thing to compare it to, we have the Masterpiece Prowl right here. You can see they're very similar in design. Both have the car hood chest, they have the door wings back here, got the windshield shins and the car bumper feet going on. So overall, it's pretty close. The Masterpiece toy has better proportions, especially with this chest to shoulder width. This Prowl's a little too top heavy. Pretty common complaint with him. He's got kind of small legs compared to the rest of his body. Also, this is what I was referring to earlier about the doors slanting upward a little bit. That's how they're supposed to look. So it's a shame they couldn't include like a second kind of hinge right here just to make it do that. Also, one more thing to point out that this guide made me think of. See, he's got shoulder cannons. Prowl is usually depicted with shoulder cannons. You'll notice that Siege Prowl lacks those. However, if you look, he has slots on his shoulders where cannons could be fitted if he had them. And one thing we do know is that this mold is being retooled into the Decepticon Barricade. And not the Micromaster one, but the G1 version of the movie character Barricade. And Barricade himself is really just going to be a redeco of Smokescreen. Has the same head sculpt, has Smokescreen's shoulder cannon weapons. So he'll be able to attach his cannons to these slots. So it looks like some versions of the Datsun family will have cannons, some won't, but they all do have the slots to store them. Alright, and that's going to complete our look at War for Cybertron Siege Prowl. Not quite as much to say about him as some of the other figures. He's a relatively simple deluxe compared to the rest of them. He's not a perfect toy by any means. Again, his proportions are a little odd in robot mode. His legs just seem too small, his chest seems too wide. But he's passable. You know, he works for, you know, a deluxe class Prowl toy. And he's definitely a lot closer than the Combiner Wars one. The only other thing you could really compare him to is the 2008 Universe Prowl, which unfortunately I don't have, so I can't show him off. But this guy, he works. But honestly, this is probably going to be the closest thing you get to a G1 Prowl interpretation at the deluxe scale. So until something better comes along, this is kind of what we got. It's not terrible, not amazing either. But that's how I feel about the toy. How do you feel about him? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to give it a like. If you want to see more reviews like it or any of my other Transformers related content, make sure to hit the subscribe button as well as the notification bell to make sure you always get a heads up whenever I post something new. Thank you all for joining me again, and with all that said, I will see you next time.